You think this is just about Caitlin Clark getting roughed up in the WNBA? Think again. What's happening right now is so much bigger and so much more dangerous for professional sports that league lawyers across the country are working overtime, scrambling to figure out how to contain what could be the most devastating legal precedent in sports history. While everyone's been focused on federal investigations and Senator Jim Banks sending angry letters to the WNBA, they've completely missed the real earthquake that's about to hit. Clark's case isn't just threatening the WNBA anymore. It's about to shatter the foundational legal framework that every major league uses to protect itself from player lawsuits. And once that domino falls, there's no putting it back together. I'm Jax Riley, and I've been following the digital breadcrumbs on this story since day one. What I've uncovered goes way beyond basketball drama. We're talking about a legal strategy so sophisticated that it could fundamentally change how athletes are protected, how leagues operate, and how workplace harassment laws apply to professional sports. Before we dive deep into exactly how Clark's representation team just weaponized civil rights law in a way that has the NFL, NBA, and every other major league absolutely terrified, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because what I'm about to show you isn't being covered anywhere else, and you're going to want to follow this story as it completely reshapes professional athletics. Here's what the other channels aren't telling you about why this case is so dangerous. It's not the federal investigation angle that has sports lawyers panicking. It's the legal precedent Clark's team is systematically building that could turn every hard foul, every aggressive play, every bit of workplace tension in professional sports into potential federal litigation. But the story doesn't end there. Let me break down exactly how we got to this point and why what happens next could change everything. The temperature of the online conversation around Clark has been building for months, but most people are reading the signals all wrong. They see the 17 flagrant fouls she's drawn, nearly double any other player. They see her getting ranked 9th by fellow players in all-star voting despite breaking records with 1.3 million fan votes. They see the targeting, the cheap shots, the cultural hostility. What they're missing is how Clark's representation team has been methodically documenting every single incident, not just as basketball controversy, but as evidence of discriminatory workplace treatment. Every elbow, every shove, every player quote about handling her physically has been cataloged, time-stamped, and legally classified. And here's where it gets really interesting. Sources in the legal community suggest Clark's team isn't just building a case against the WNBA. They're building a template that could be applied to any professional sports league where athletes face targeting, harassment, or discriminatory treatment. Think about that for a second. If Clark successfully argues that repeated physical targeting based on cultural or identity factors constitutes workplace harassment under federal civil rights law, she's not just winning a case. She's creating legal precedent that every future athlete can point to. Suddenly, that rookie getting hazed in the NFL? Potential lawsuit. The international player facing cultural hostility in the NBA? Federal case. The female referee dealing with systematic disrespect? Civil rights violation. Clark's case becomes the roadmap for turning sports culture issues into federal legal matters. Okay, now let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. Legal experts are whispering that Clark's representation includes attorneys who specialize in Title VII workplace discrimination cases. These aren't sports lawyers. These are civil rights attorneys who know exactly how to frame physical targeting as discriminatory treatment. The strategy appears to be brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of arguing that basketball is too rough, they're arguing that Clark's treatment differs systematically from other players' experiences. Instead of claiming sports injury, they're claiming discriminatory workplace conditions. Instead of asking for rule changes, they're asking for federal civil rights protection. And here's the part that should terrify every league office in America. If this strategy works, it doesn't stay contained to the WNBA. Legal precedent spreads like wildfire through the court system. But here's what they missed about the real nuclear option Clark's team is holding. The most dangerous aspect of this entire situation isn't what's happening on the court. It's what's happening in the legal documents that aren't public yet. Because while everyone's focused on Senator Jim Banks's letters and Stephen A. Smith saying they have a case, Clark's attorneys are quietly building something much more sophisticated. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges. The systematic documentation of Clark's treatment isn't just about WNBA incidents. It's about establishing a pattern of discriminatory treatment that could be applied as precedent across all professional sports. Here's how the legal framework works. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act prohibits workplace discrimination based on protected characteristics. Traditionally, sports leagues have argued they're entertainment, not typical workplaces, and that physical competition falls outside normal workplace harassment definitions. But Clark's case is designed to shatter that protection. By documenting systematic targeting that differs from standard competitive treatment, her team is arguing that professional sports are workplaces subject to federal anti-discrimination law. And if that argument succeeds, every league's legal immunity disappears overnight. The ripple effects would be absolutely massive. Every NFL player who's ever been targeted for their political views could claim discriminatory treatment. Every NBA international player facing cultural hostility could file federal complaints. Every female coach or referee dealing with systematic disrespect could demand civil rights protection. We're not talking about changing basketball rules. We're talking about fundamentally redefining how federal law applies to professional athletics. And that's why sports lawyers across every major league are reportedly working around the clock to game out the worst-case scenarios. Let me paint you the picture of what this could look like if Clark's precedent takes hold. Imagine every rookie hazing ritual being scrutinized for discriminatory treatment. Every veteran's aggressive welcome to new players being evaluated as potential workplace harassment. Every cultural or identity-based conflict in professional sports becoming grounds for federal litigation. The temperature of the online conversation suggests we're already seeing the early stages of this shift. Athletes and their representatives are paying attention to how Clark's case develops, because they recognize the potential to use similar strategies for their own situations. But that brings us to the inevitable question. How did we get to a point where one basketball player's treatment could threaten the legal foundation of all professional sports? The answer lies in how sophisticated modern athlete representation has become, and how Clark's team specifically has weaponized every aspect of this controversy for maximum legal and cultural leverage. While the WNBA stayed silent about Clark's targeting, her representation was building something unprecedented. Not just a sports controversy, but a civil rights case study that could rewrite federal law application to professional athletics. They've been connecting the dots between individual incidents and systematic patterns. They've been filtering out the noise of sports drama to identify legally actionable discrimination. They've been pulling the thread from basketball controversy to federal civil rights violation. And the most brilliant part? They've been doing it all in public, building cultural support while simultaneously constructing legal arguments. Every viral clip of Clark being targeted doesn't just generate sympathy. It becomes evidence of systematic discriminatory treatment. The economic numbers only make the case stronger. Clark has generated 600% increases in merchandise sales and 360% jumps in viewership. She's become the single most valuable asset the WNBA has ever seen. And when that economically critical player faces systematic targeting without league protection, it's not just sports drama anymore. It's discriminatory treatment of the workplace's most valuable employee. But here's what the other channels won't tell you about why this timeline was so perfectly orchestrated. The timing of everything that's happened around Clark isn't coincidental. It's strategic. Her team let the targeting incidents pile up, while the league stayed silent, building public outrage and documenting systematic patterns. They allowed federal political pressure to build through Senator Banks's letters and Sean McClain's Wall Street Journal opinion piece calling for Justice Department action. Then, just as the controversy reaches peak cultural and political temperature, they're positioned to unveil a legal strategy that goes far beyond sports. They're not just seeking protection for Clark. They're seeking to establish federal civil rights precedent that could fundamentally change professional athletics. And here's the really terrifying part for league offices. Once legal precedent is established, you can't unestablish it if Clark's case successfully argues that systematic targeting in professional sports constitutes workplace discrimination under federal law. That precedent becomes available to every future athlete who faces similar treatment. The NFL would have to reconsider every aspect of rookie treatment, veteran hazing, and cultural conflicts. The NBA would need to evaluate how international players are integrated and protected. Even college athletics could be affected as student athletes increasingly assert workplace rights. What started as basketball controversy could end up requiring federal oversight of professional sports culture, systematic monitoring of player treatment, and civil rights compliance across every major league. I've been filtering through the noise of sports commentary to understand the real signals here, and what emerges is a sophisticated legal strategy disguised as sports drama. Clark's representation team has turned basketball targeting into a potential civil rights revolution. So what's fact and what's speculation? Let's break it down. Here are the facts. Senator Jim Banks did send formal letters to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert demanding answers about Clark's treatment, specifically citing incidents like the Kennedy-Carter hit. Sean McClain, a former White House advisor, did publish a Wall Street Journal opinion piece titled "The WNBA and Caitlin Clark's Civil Rights," explicitly calling for Justice Department Civil Rights Division action if evidence shows discrimination. Stephen A. Smith publicly stated they have a case regarding potential federal intervention, warning that if political pressure builds, it could be a problem for the WNBA. These aren't random political statements. They're building blocks of a federal case. Clark does lead the league in flagrant fouls drawn with 17 incidents, nearly double any other player. She did receive only 9th place ranking from fellow players in All-Star voting, despite receiving a record 1.3 million fan votes. These statistics demonstrate systematic differences in how she's treated by both opponents and peers. The economic dependency is real. Merchandise sales have increased 600%, viewership has jumped 360%, and analysts suggest Clark could have billion-dollar value to the league by 2025. The WNBA has never been more financially dependent on a single player. But here's what moves us into speculation territory. Claims of active federal investigations remain unsubstantiated beyond political pressure and media opinion pieces. No federal agency has announced actual investigations, and most of the federal involvement appears to be political theater and expert opinion rather than active government action. However, and this is crucial, federal agencies don't need to announce investigations to begin preliminary reviews. Civil rights complaints can trigger quiet inquiries that never become public, until they result in formal action. The legal strategy I've described based on Title VII workplace discrimination law isn't confirmed, but legal experts suggest it's exactly the kind of sophisticated approach Clark's high-powered representation would pursue. The precedent implications are real, even if we can't confirm the specific legal theories being developed behind the scenes. What we can say with confidence is that this case has moved far beyond sports controversy into potential federal civil rights territory. And that shift alone creates precedent implications that have every major sports league paying attention. But that brings us to the real question: what happens next? And how far could this precedent bomb actually spread? If Clark's team moves forward with federal civil rights claims, the legal process itself becomes more dangerous to professional sports than any specific outcome. Discovery would force leagues to produce internal communications about player treatment, cultural policies, and discrimination prevention. That process alone could expose systematic problems across multiple sports. Even if Clark's specific case doesn't succeed, the legal theories being developed create a roadmap for future athletes. The argument that professional sports constitute workplaces subject to federal anti-discrimination law could be tested and refined through multiple cases across different leagues. The cultural momentum is already building. Social media conversations increasingly frame athletic targeting and harassment through civil rights lenses rather than sports competition terms. Athletes and their representatives are learning that federal law might offer protection that league policies don't provide. And here's the precedent: bomb's real explosive potential. If one athlete successfully establishes that systematic targeting based on identity or cultural factors constitutes federal workplace discrimination, every future incident gets evaluated through that legal framework. Suddenly, leagues can't just dismiss cultural conflicts as part of sports culture. They can't ignore systematic targeting as competitive dynamics. They have to treat every player interaction as potential federal civil rights compliance issue. The administrative burden alone would be staggering. Leagues would need civil rights compliance officers, systematic monitoring of player treatment, documentation of incident response, and federal reporting mechanisms. The legal liability would be enormous, with every player interaction potentially subject to federal oversight. But the competitive implications might be even more significant. If leagues have to ensure equal treatment and protection for all players under federal anti-discrimination law, traditional aspects of sports culture like rookie hazing, veteran privileges, and competitive intimidation could become legally problematic. We're potentially looking at federal oversight of professional sports culture, which would fundamentally change how athletes, coaches, and officials interact. The informal hierarchies and cultural dynamics that have defined professional athletics for decades could be subject to civil rights compliance requirements. And once that precedent exists, there's no limiting it to one league or one sport. Federal law precedent applies across all jurisdictions and all similar workplace situations. Clark's case could literally rewrite the legal framework governing every aspect of professional athletics. The question isn't whether this will affect other sports. The question is how quickly the legal theories being developed around Clark's situation spread to other athletes who've faced systematic targeting, cultural hostility, or discriminatory treatment. Reading the signals from legal expert discussions and sports industry conversations, there's genuine concern that we're approaching a tipping point where professional sports could be subject to the same federal civil rights oversight as any other workplace industry. That would represent the most fundamental change to professional athletics since the establishment of players' unions. And it all started with one rookie basketball player who refused to accept that getting targeted was just part of the game. So here's what's really happening. Caitlin Clark's case isn't just about basketball anymore. It's become a test case for whether federal civil rights law can be applied to professional sports culture. And if that test succeeds, every league, every team, and every athlete relationship gets redefined under federal oversight. The precedent bomb is already armed. The question is whether it's going to detonate and reshape professional sports forever, or whether leagues will find ways to defuse it before the legal theories become established precedent. But based on everything I've uncovered, the fuse is already lit. And when precedent bombs explode, the damage spreads far beyond the initial target. Every major sport, every professional league, every athlete who's ever faced systematic targeting or cultural hostility could suddenly have federal civil rights protection. That's not just changing the game. That's changing the entire system that governs how professional athletics operates in America. What do you think? Are we watching the beginning of a civil rights revolution in professional sports? Or will leagues find ways to contain this before it spreads? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this story is far from over. If you found this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. The precedent implications of Clark's case are going to unfold over months and years, and I'll be tracking every development that other channels miss. And share this video with anyone who needs to understand that what's happening with Caitlin Clark goes way beyond basketball. Because when legal precedent gets established, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads like wildfire through every similar situation. Until next time, keep connecting the dots, keep filtering out the noise, and keep watching for the signals that reveal what's really happening behind the headlines.